Every day we see more tents under bridges, more families living out of cars. And while the problems seem insurmountable, the solutions are simpler than you think. We share the real stories and the real solutions of homelessness, what works, what doesn't, and how communities like ours can do better. I'm Baron King, and this is Give Me Shelter. Well, welcome back to Give Me Shelter. Thanks so much for joining us. As you know, when I've talked about homelessness on previous podcasts, I often reference things that are working, things that are not working. And it's really hard to have a conversation about homelessness without having a conversation about politics. So, because so many of the safety net programs, so many of the effective programs that happen or are possible originate at the federal level, trickle down into the state, and then impact nonprofits like us. So today I'd like to introduce our guest. It's Anna Golladay. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Anna is running for the 3rd Congressional District of Tennessee, a seat that's currently held by Representative Chuck Fleischman. I first got to meet you about 2 years ago when you were getting into politics. And what stuck out was you wanted to learn more about homelessness, and you came to me to have some conversations about it. And what I would tell anybody is any person, politician or not, that wants to talk about homelessness, I'd love to talk to them. So anyway, we're excited to have you here. Let me just start off. This is an interesting election year. There's a lot of people that are frustrated, how would you describe the state of Southeast Tennessee, where you are looking to represent?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what we're seeing happen right now in politics. We have watched a lot of primaries close over the last few weeks, and we have seen some pretty progressive candidates win some of those primaries. Some that identify as Democratic Socialists, which I think none of us would have anticipated,
Sure.
or we don't tend to anticipate it on a regular basis. But I do think frustration is the leading cause of that. Yeah. There is a desire for people to feel as if they're being heard, and there's a desire for people to feel as if their interests are the interests that are on the lips of the people in Washington, and they are watching in real time that not happening. Yeah. It's just not the case. We have an administration that is doing its best to make its own money and then additionally spend taxpayer money when it promises not to. We have Congress that is virtually not working. I mean, they can't seem to get anything done. And when they do pass a bill, like they did this past week with the bipartisan housing bill, they're met with a hostage situation
Apathy.
by the president, yes, yeah. And apathy, and saying, well, I don't think people care about housing, so let's make sure that we make it harder for people to vote instead. And that's not lost on people, even people who only get their news from, the local stations, or only get their news from a YouTube channel or a TikTok thread. Understand that their best interest is not something that anyone is paying attention to. And I think that as I'm talking to people in Southeast Tennessee and District 3, they recognize that they just want somebody to pay attention to them. Yeah. They just want to feel as if they're being heard and that they have someone who's willing to fight on their behalf. I have never been known as someone who keeps my mouth shut well, and that has gotten me in trouble a lot of my life. And also, it is the thing that I think people are finding most refreshing about me as a candidate right now, because I recognize that their needs are at the forefront of what politics really should be paying attention to right now. And I am also a lower middle class working individual. I'm a small business owner. I'm wondering every month how to make my dollars stretch the most that they can so that we can, as a household, make sure we're paying our own bills. So I am a lot like them.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who can self-fund this campaign or, has a ton of money on hand to just not be able to work for 9 months while I do this.
Sure.
I'm working and campaigning at the same time. And everybody else is doing the same thing, working one or two jobs and just trying to do the best they
Yeah.
can.
While I am not a politician, I consider myself a representative for about 1,500 to 2,000 people that have
You
no
are.
voice, have no say, the homeless community
Yeah.
in southeastern Tennessee. And I've been fortunate enough to go to Day on the Hill events in both Washington, D.C. and Nashville to advocate for certain programs, certain
Right.
policies, just to educate our lawmakers. And one of the things I've noticed in the last year and a half is uh, our Republican representation in Washington, D.C., no longer wants to have any conversation with me. Prior to this administration coming in, we could at
Hmm.
least have conversations. We
Sure.
could at least get somewhere. And it almost feels as though the current representation doesn't want to talk about homelessness, doesn't want to address it. And so that's been a big change that I've noticed personally.
Yeah. I think that there's a perception that anything in the way of the agenda is a speed bump.
Yeah.
And while we are watching, and we continue to watch a kind of criminalization over care mentality, whether that's around homelessness, whether that's around immigration, whether that's around affordability, there is a preference to indict or to blame or to criminalize others, in so much as that they can excuse their inaction.
Right.
And I originally, like, I decided to run for this office. I never thought I would run for federal office, but I decided to do this mainly because I am a constituent that is also really fed up
Yeah.
and really tired of people not paying attention.
Yeah.
And as you know, I mean, I've been lobbying locally for a change in the attitude around homelessness. The city council sees me coming and they know exactly what I'm going to talk about every
Yeah.
single time. And I will not. I will be as tenacious as I am with our city council, with my colleagues on the Hill, and I think that they're just their ability to ignore and their ability to kind of shield themselves from anything that either causes them discomfort or that they believe will not benefit them from a financial or a press hit standpoint is something that should bother all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for those of you listening, watching that are not familiar with Anna's platform, what are some of the things that you would like to see changed if you get into office?
Yeah, so I mean, I know we're, obviously talking about the challenges of homelessness here in District 3, but this is a systemic challenge, right? No one chooses to be homeless. Anyone that tells you, those people, they would rather be on the street than anywhere else, are as full of it as they come. No one is choosing this, but they are thrusted into this because of a set of systems and a set of policies that have made life difficult for them in one way or another, whether it's centered around healthcare or centered around housing or centered around their ability to maintain a job, or their ability to get the help they need, from everything from prescription drugs to voucher to allow them to have a place to live. And so for me, the work that I am hoping to do in DC really focuses on those systems and the changing and of both the attitude around those systems and the systems that are harming the people that need it most. I have three primary tenets of work that I'm trying to do for my campaign that kind of always float to the top of the conversation, and those are affordability, healthcare, and protections for the worker.
Yeah.
And so none of us, it's not lost on anyone that affordability is the buzzword, but it shouldn't just be a buzzword.
Sure.
It really is the problem.
Sure.
And we have billionaires who are tax sheltered to the hilt. We have a social security system that is on the brink of death because we have capped the social security payroll tax for the wealthiest.
Yep.
We have groceries and gas and housing that are outpricing people every day because of tariffs and a war and an inability for us to fund things at the federal level in any way that makes sense. I still contend and will till my dying day that healthcare is a human right. I don't believe that you should have to earn it by having a job or being married to someone with a job. I think that we, as the most developed nation in the world, should be able to pull this off in a much different and better way.
Yeah.
And so whether it is a strengthening of the ACA in advance of Medicare for all system, or whether it is kind of reinventing the wheel from scratch and looking at the success that other nations have had, we have got to do better, and we can do better. And I think that, again, the worker is the backbone of Tennessee's economy. We can't expect anyone to survive on a $7.50 minimum wage.
No.
Period. Hard stop. And we also know that we can't rely on a supermajority at the state level to increase that minimum wage.
Sure.
So I will always be a proponent of federally doing that. And in addition to finding assistance for folks from a wage standpoint, I also think that we need to be really mindful of what's coming down the pike from both an industry and a protection standpoint around artificial intelligence. There's not a single issue that coalesces people together right now on the campaign trail more than data centers.
Yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
There's nothing that people hate more. And people don't even know in many instances what they are or what they do, and they can't stand them.
It used to be homeless shelters.
It did.
Now
it's
I'm
data
knocked
centers.
down to number 2. So that's encouraging for me. Yeah.
But, I think one of the biggest disservices that we did the country 2 decades ago is to not regulate social media when we had the ability to do so, and the ability to do it mindfully and with an intentionality. We have to get ahead of that when it comes to artificial intelligence. And so regulation, an understanding of where and how data centers can be built, protections for the worker around industry that may decide that their job is not necessary because they are able to automate it in one way or another. There are industries that are going to make billions and billions of dollars off of artificial intelligence, and it's not lost on me, nor should it be lost on anyone else, that it will be the worker and only the worker that suffers from that.
Yeah.
And so how do we mitigate that? How do we get ahead of that? All 3 of those things, healthcare, affordability, and worker protections, single-handedly create safety nets to prevent against homelessness.
Right.
They are the tenets and the foundation of making sure that the crisis that we are watching happen across the country doesn't get worse.
Yes.
And they also are ways in which we can improve upon the challenge that our folks that are facing homelessness are up against.
You bring up a great point, and I think most people probably think I spend all my waking hours dealing just with homelessness, but we're also looking at that swath of Americana that is living paycheck to paycheck, one car repair away from falling into homelessness. And what we're seeing is we make progress by getting somebody who's homeless housed, only to find 2 or 3 more individuals falling into homelessness. So I think those are really important points. How do you view our nation's homeless crisis?
Sad and problematic and challenging. I mean, I think, I'm, for those that don't know my history, I am a former United Methodist pastor. And so I come at a lot of my own personal ethics from an understanding of what we should be doing for the least of these. And there are very few things that the person who's I emulate from my faith story asked of me. And that was to, provide clothing and shelter and to, welcome the stranger and to love others as much as I love him and to be someone who lives that way every day of my life. What more could we ask of one another than to literally have those few simple rules as the way that we spend our day to day, right?
Right.
And so when I look at the state of the homeless crisis, both as it relates to the nation and to Tennessee, we know that Tennessee is different in a handful of ways, but not in many ways from what's happening in the rest of the country. I mean, thank goodness we have fewer children that are homeless in Tennessee than we do across the rest of the country. But the fact that there are children that are homeless, I mean, should make everyone's heart break.
Yes.
It should create in us a discomfort that causes everyone to say, "Oh my, like there should be no child that doesn't have a place to lay their head. What can I do about that?"
Yeah.
And I think that, and we also know that in Tennessee we have more single folks who are homeless than we do families.
Right.
The national average is like 3 and 5 are single adults. In Tennessee, it's 4 and 5. So 80% of people in Tennessee are single and homeless, which then also means that they don't have a network of care. They don't have a family or a community unless they have chosen a community. And even then, that chosen community often looks a lot like them, right? They are not in community with others who are not in the same situation. And so the way that I see things unfolding is not just a conversation around policy. It's also a conversation around community.
Yes.
And a community of care and a community that is kind of woven together so that even when one string or one thread pulls, it does not disintegrate.
Right.
And we are not seeing that right now. So for me, it is an emotional response to my, like, how I see this plight, because I am deeply moved, and also most days very pissed off about it.
Yeah.
It makes me mad.
Yeah, when you boil it down, philosophies to addressing homelessness, everything falls into one of two camps. One is make a difference through investment in social services and housing, or use a law enforcement approach. And what we're seeing is the Cicero Institute is lobbying the federal government and our state legislature to say, you know what, the best way to deal with this is arresting people, involuntary commitment, and that's just not going to solve the problem. There's no end game to that approach. You're just saddling people with more expenses, criminal records, and then how are they supposed to get an apartment?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we have lost that we continue to make this a conversation around preconditions versus no conditions. We want folks to have we want them to meet a certain level of expectation in order for them to be worthy of help.
Sure.
And one, that's simply not possible based on the way that we are criminalizing folks that are unhoused. Two, we are asking of those that have the least and that can do the least to meet expectations that we are not asking of ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
Even people with, crappy credit scores can get a high interest credit card.
Right.
Right. And yet
or a payday loan.
Or a payday loan, right.
Yeah.
And we're expecting more of those who need more.
Yeah.
And I think that as we look at the way that law enforcement is engaged, I mean, as a Democrat, I'm a proponent of a reform around law enforcement in a multiplicity of ways, but specifically as it relates to mental health care and us having a cross section of care opportunities that go into the streets or that
Yeah.
show up at when there is an arrest or something that happens. But I think that in and of itself also speaks to the way that we should be acting with and talking with those that are living on the streets.
Yes.
Because if we are arresting them with the expectation that that is going to be the one single bottom of the barrel event in their life that changes them and causes them to, have an awakening to do things differently, we're kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the least of rock bottom for them.
Yeah.
They have either already hit rock bottom or their rock bottom is going to come because of that arrest afterwards, not because they are sitting in a jail cell wondering how they got there.
Yeah. That's very well put. So I'm going to combine the next two questions. We've talked a lot about, or a little bit about, how the drivers of homelessness tend to be systemic and not individual factors. And then when we understand a problem, then it's a little bit easier to craft interventions. So as you look at our nations and our regions' homeless crisis, what would you say are the biggest drivers of this homeless crisis, and what do you propose that we should do about it, at least at the federal level and maybe at the state level?
I think the biggest drivers are our inability to let people live full and funded lives. And when I say funded, I don't mean funded by the federal government.
Sure.
I mean funded by their capacity to work and live. And I think our healthcare system is negating care for those that need it most simply because they don't have the capacity to pay or the ability to show up and get a prescription on a regular basis, or they don't live in a place where they can get to a store on a monthly basis to actually, get those prescriptions filled. From a federal standpoint, I think there's a couple of things that we can and should be doing that are kind of the bare bones minimum for funding and an expectation of what the federal government can and should provide to folks. I mean, we need to expand rental vouchers.
Yeah.
And we need to expand them so that all low-income households are eligible for them, not just those that meet a certain criteria, because that is a mitigation effort in addition to solving part of the problem, right? As you said earlier, we know that so many folks are one paycheck or one car breakdown or one broken arm away from living in a vehicle, living on the streets, being evicted. And if we can expand those rental vouchers, not just for those that need it for immediate housing, but also for those that are currently experiencing, like, just teetering on the edge, that can create a kind of a pipeline effect of us not getting any farther down the road than we are. I also think that we need to fully fund HUD grants. The homeless assistance grants that HUD has offered are in no way enough, and also we have a Congress that balks on funding them every single year. Some years we get. I hate to even say we get lucky that they fully fund them. I mean, shame on us for feeling that we have accomplished the bare minimum of funding, a HUD grant. I also think that we need to, as a Congress, support and then fully fund housing first opportunities. And that means that those preconditions that I talked about go away. There are countries like Finland, as you know, who are doing housing first approaches, not asking folks to meet a certain expectation before they're eligible for funding, that make care and progress more possible.
Right.
And so if we can approach and then fully fund a housing first option, I think we'll get there. And then the last thing I think that it's incumbent on those of us that are elected to office to do is that we have to also fund our continuum of care
Right.
initiatives, right? And so that right now we are funding continuum of care for temporary access to help or temporary access to housing.
Right.
And that continuum of care, COC, is available for people as a stopgap measure. But what we know is that people that access COC funds often access them and then are back on the streets and have to come back through the system again to access
Right.
them at another point. Whereas if we can fund COC through permanent housing solutions, not temporary housing solutions, then we have the ability for those folks to have a longevity and a runway
Right.
to improve their lives over the course of a time that that does not put them back in
Right.
harm's way or put them back in a situation where organizations like yours or other nonprofits or our faith communities are the ones that are always stepping in to solve the issue
Right.
when it really should be the federal government, from my vantage point, that is starting and solidifying the help and letting organizations like the Chat Foundation and our faith communities come in as support,
Yeah.
not as the only way that things get accomplished.
Exactly. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize about HUD is since HUD was formed in the mid '80s, at different times programs have been added, programs have been cut, and I think a lot of people maybe aren't sold on the permanent supportive housing program that HUD runs. And here's what I would say: it's not for everybody. It's not a one-size-fits-all tool. And that's really the problem, is that for certain individuals, it's perfect. It works really well.
Right.
For others, it's unnecessary. It's more expensive than it needs to be. About 15 years ago, HUD ran a program. It was called transitional housing. Now, transitional housing is morphed into a kind of a generic term.
Right.
But the way it worked is HUD would work with a local service provider like Chat Foundation and would subsidize a portion of an individual's rent for a 2-year lease. They were required to work with a case manager to address shortcomings in their lives. Maybe it's vocational training, whatever it is. And at the end of that 2-year lease, if they were current on their portion of the payments, they received 80% of what they paid into the landlord back as a lump sum. When we ran that program, it resulted in over 70% home ownership. And what I would say as a taxpayer, would I rather have all the funds go to permanently supporting people, or maybe a 2-year assistance program that gets somebody up on their feet, stable,
Right.
and then they get a chance at they're forever a home. They're part of the tax base. And so what I would advocate for is we need more tools in the toolbox.
Right.
Expecting one program to address all of homelessness just isn't realistic to me.
No, and you know that I'm beating a drum that the city, has heard me beat forever. We also need, increased participation on behalf of our localities to create what the in between is.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of permanence and or temporary into permanence. It's also a question of how are the funds that the federal government is allocating to our locales being used in wise ways, so that we are not perpetuating a problem versus helping to solve a problem.
Sure.
And I am, as you know, so incredibly frustrated with, what I am seeing specifically here out of Chattanooga and our local officials, because no matter the solution brought to their door, there's always an excuse. In the same way that there's an excuse with HUD. Like, that doesn't work for everyone. Exactly.
Right.
But why don't we have a menu of options where at least one of those things will work? And in some cases, that is temporary, low barrier shelters.
Yeah.
But what do I know?
So for those listening that don't know a whole lot about you, that aren't necessarily happy with the way life is here in southeastern Tennessee and are hoping that there can be some positive change. Tell them how you plan to make that happen.
So I come at this candidacy having lived a variety of lives. I have served in corporate America. So I have sat around board tables in C-suites where I see decisions being made on behalf of other people when those people aren't there. I've also, I know what it means to make six figures and how much easier my life was, right? When I had a job like that. But I've also served as a pastor. And so I have sat around tables with people on the worst days of their lives.
Yeah.
And I have heard them lament over the things that are most challenging for them and the things that are breaking their hearts and the things that are causing them heartburn. I am a small business owner, so I know what it's like to struggle to make payroll and to worry about how much more expensive my supplies are and have to figure out how to parlay that into a good that I can sell that's affordable to my customer, but also still allows me to pay my mortgage. And I'm a community organizer. I've been in the streets. I've been in the streets a lot here in Chattanooga. Yeah. I'm trained as a protest chaplain, which means I put my collar on and I go out in the middle of protests and I stand between protesters and counter protesters and I de-escalate and I keep the peace. And I am someone who tries to be really mindful of the need for all sides to have their voices heard, even in the midst of conflict. I am running for this office because I believe I am a better listener than our current representative. I also know that the simple fact that my competitor hasn't had a town hall since 2011. We're now at 5,403 days since there's been a town hall or a Q&A or a public accounting of what he thinks or what he wants or what he's going to do. That, as a constituent, is unacceptable to me, and I am changing that narrative. I'm doing 18 town halls before Election Day even happens, 2 in every county that I'm running in. I want people to know how to find me, how to access me. I want people to know that even if I disagree with them, I'm going to listen critically to the things they need. And I'm going to do my best to find a solution that works for them. And I also know that the frustration that others are feeling, I am also feeling. I am not a wealthy individual. I am not someone who is able to do this work and quit my job in order to do it. And so I get it. I really do. I think that's one of the benefits of a lot of the candidates that are running right now is that we are people who are like the people that we're asking to vote for us. And I think there's a comfort in feeling as though the person that you are going to have represent you really does understand.
Yeah.
It isn't just lip service. It isn't someone who, is stock trading on the floor and is making millions of dollars off of opportunities. And so for me, I am coming at this not as a politician, but as a public servant. And I want there to be the service aspect to this job in a way that we are not seeing right now.
Right.
The other thing I will say is that I am a firm believer in term limits. And so there will be people who I may serve that don't agree with me all the time. My promise to them is that I'm not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
Like 5 terms is it for me, 10 years, period. I don't think anyone should be in that office more than that. And so if it does nothing else other than ease their concern that the person that they voted for didn't win and isn't representing them, they don't have to look at me long.
Right. Right.
But I think that we have got to create a movement of people and an understanding around government that lets people trust in it again.
Yeah.
And people just simply don't. They don't trust our politicians. They don't trust the government to do what's in their best interest. And I am not going to be perfect at this, but I do believe that I am coming at it with an expectation on myself and an expectation of what the voters of Tennessee 3rd District need, that allow me to do this job with an air of care and an air of intentionality that will put them first, even if they don't always agree with me.
Yeah. So this episode's going to air in about 3 weeks. What's that day that everybody has to go to the voting booth that's so important?
Yeah, so early voting starts on July 17th. And the primary election is August the 6th. Okay. Now, that is a Thursday because in the infinite wisdom of Tennessee politics, having it on a day other than Tuesday seemed to make all the sense in the world, right? Yeah. But August 6th is the primary date. And then the general election will be held the first Tuesday of November, like always. And that's November 3rd. Okay. So the first election is August the 6th, Thursday, and the second is Tuesday, November the 3rd.
Okay. Well, best of luck to you. I know you're very busy. I appreciate you making time
Thanks
for
for
us.
asking me.
It's been very refreshing to hear some of your views on what's going on and how to make some change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Give Me Shelter. If you made it this far in the episode, I invite you to share it with at least one person today, because change happens one conversation at a time. I'm Baron King. We'll see you next time.